Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. Becoming the most valuable sports franchise in the world doesn't happen without risk. A man who's willing to bet it all, and the players ready to make their own luck. America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys, is the story of the 1990s Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones's impact on NFL history. Featuring interviews with iconic 90s players and more. Watch America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys, August 19th, only on Netflix.
Welcome to DSC's Campfires with Larry Weissoon, a unique blend of hunting, fishing, wildlife conservation, and the outdoor lifestyle. DSC's Campfires is brought to you by DSC, Conservation, Education, and Advocacy. Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. Taurus, award-winning revolvers and pistols. Stealth Vision, high-tech, precision-driven equipment for today's modern hunter. Mossberg, American-built, American-strong. Vineyard Max, deer attractants created for the aroma of success, game feeders, and other hunting products. Red 55 Winery, signature wines from Emmy Award-winning country artist Miranda Lambert, owned by Rick and Beverly Lambert. And the Choctaw Hunting Lodge, home of some of the finest hunting in North America. Now, here's Larry.
Mr. Shane, John, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, I wish we were doing this across a real campfire, but there's a little bit of distance between us this morning. With
I do too. I do too.
I understand you're in California instead of in your hometown there in Western Texas.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm over here on the left coast. They do have nice weather out there. I'll give them that.
I remember that. It wasn't too long ago. I guess a couple of years ago, we were hunting on the Steinbeck vine vineyard, I guess it was, the winery, and absolutely fantastic out there around San Luis Obispo. And I remember the weather being absolutely beautiful this time of the year compared to probably the approaching 100 degrees of temperature that's back home here in Texas.
Oh yeah. I've been watching the weather there at Alpine, and it's warmed up. It greened up, which is good. We needed it. But here it's 70 every day. That's pretty much the norm.
Well,
and
whenever go ahead.
In the afternoons, or if it gets a little overcast, you almost need a brush jacket. It's just kind of that brush jacket weather, where just a little something to break the breeze off your arms and give you a little extra layer. It's just almost cool enough to wear a jacket around here at times.
Now I'm really jealous because I can't wait to get my first trip up north. I think is here in about a month or so, or probably about the time we get to air this, and I'll be up in Maine hunting. Actually with a .454 concealed handgun, and can't wait to get up there, and hopefully the temperature will be a little bit like that. I got you on the podcast this morning because for several reasons. You and I have known each other for a while, but for those folks who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about your background. I know a little bit about it, but I want other folks to know about everything, not everything that you've done, but a few of the things that you've done.
Okay. Well, I just wrapped up 22 years with the Border Patrol last year, and I spent my career out in Sanderson and Marfa, and working that area out there, and just always loved West Texas, and my wife and I made that our home. Oh Lord, I don't know, 2001 we moved out there, and then I joined the Border Patrol, and we just love it out there. Big country, a great place to be a Border Patrol agent in that big country out there. If you like the outdoors and enjoy tracking, as I did, just there's no better place to be. And then from there, I about 10 years ago, after a trip to Africa, Africa brings out the writer in people for some reason. And
it does.
I started doing some writing with Richard Mann and Jim Wilson. Kind of helped me get my foot in the door with that. Actually, the hunt was with them in South Africa, and Richard and his son, and Jim and Linda Powell and my oldest daughter out there hunting. Anyway, we got to talking, and Jim said, you ought to think about getting into the writing business. And kind of after that, I did. I wrote an article for NRA Family and still occasionally write for them, and just started doing it and more, and you know how it kind of snowballs over time if you enjoy doing it. And then, it got to the point where you only have so many vacation days you earn in a year, and then we earn comp time too. And it was getting to be where there were a lot of events I was invited to, and hunts, and then plus family vacations and whatnot that you need the time for. And it just got to be so much. I thought, it's kind of a good time in my career to retire and just to take on the writing business full time. And I tell you, I'm fortunate it's worked out. I'm staying very busy with it.
I can tell because I see your byline a lot of different places. I love the style that you write. I love the fact of the background that you have. So very often these days you deal with writers who all of a sudden decide they wanted to write, but they don't have a background when it comes to anything having to do really with the guns that they're talking about, and or instances of hunting as well too. Now, you've been hunting a long time, haven't you?
Oh yes, sir. Yeah, I started at a very young age hunting with my granddad, actually down there in your part of the world. He ran a ranch that ranch took up or Lavaca County and Colorado County divided that ranch. Best I remember, it was the old Cutbirth Ranch, kind of west of Sheridan, and started hunting down there as a kid with him. I couldn't have been more than 6-7 years old. He would take me with him, and been hunting my whole life.
What a great place to start. I just finished an article about John Wooders, and one of the first time I read an article by Wooders, it was called The Art of Brush Hunting in Outdoor Life back in the early 60s, as I recall. And he was hunting. That story was written about hunting there around the Sheridan area, which is kind of, for folks who don't understand that part of Texas, it's probably about 80, 90 miles almost due west of Houston, and right on the edge of the Gulf Coast area. But that area, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, that was one of the few places that had white-tailed deer in our part of the world. But what a great place that has turned out to be over the years, and what a great start to have. Do you remember the first guns that you used when you hunted with your granddad?
The first, yeah. Oh yeah, big time. The first one he had me shooting was a single shot H&R 12 gauge that would kick your teeth out. And he set up a little board, maybe 20 yards up, leaned it up against a tree, handed me a handful of mismatched buckshot, and said, "Shoot that board, boy." And I did. And I remember that gun. The first gun I killed a deer with was a Remington Mohawk in a 222 of all things. I killed my first deer with that gun.
Those were absolutely fantastic little guns. When you talk about the shotgun, I shot my first deer with a 12 gauge with buckshot, and I've told the story many times. Sitting up in a tree, and buck comes by. I thought it was a world record deer, and shot and knocked the deer down. He took off running, and back then I've used my granddad's single shot. I think it was an old bridge shotgun, if I recall, 12 gauge, and man, I broke that shotgun open, pulled a little bit too much on the forearm, and when I did, I disengaged the barrel, and it went tumbling down to the ground about 20 feet. for a second there. The world record deer is running off, and I'm thinking about, my God, I got to get the barrel, and darn near jumped out of the tree. Thank you. I almost fell out of the tree getting down there, grabbed that thing, took off running, put another buck in the barrel, and it fell right over this world record. And when I turned around to look at it, he went from a world record to the prettiest little spike with 4-inch spikes on one side and about a 6-inch spike on the other side. So when you mentioned shotgun, gosh, all that came back to me, and just that quick too.
Oh Lord, yeah. So all the dads and granddads listening out there, a single shot 12 gauge is not the best gun to start a kid out with. They will remember it, but they won't like it.
And as I recall, that wasn't a very long barrel either. So I mean,
no.
Oh my goodness. Well, after that, you got into law enforcement. What made you want to do that to start with?
Part of that is the blame from gun writers. Charlie Askins, Bill Jordan, Jim Wilson, Skeeter Skelton, reading those things about the Border Patrol. And at one time I thought I wanted to be a game warden.
Right.
And, but then once I got a taste of West Texas and, looked into the Border Patrol a little more, I decided to go that route. I wanted to wait and get a station where you could do the old patrol work. There were some stations, and there still are some stations that, there's some places where it's all checkpoint or it's a more urban environment,
right.
And I cared nothing about that. But I wanted to do to be out in the big country and do the tracking. So I got to checking around once we had moved to Alpine, and everybody kept telling me there's like, well, Sanderson, if that's the kind of work you want to do,
right.
Sanderson is the place to do it. And I joked with my wife years before when we were driving through there. I said, I think I'm going to join the Border Patrol and ask to work in Sanderson. And she thought I was kidding. And actually, there we go. She takes me a little more serious now. Turned out when I went through the hiring process, and they called and they said, well, we're going to offer you Douglas, Arizona or Presidio, Texas. And I talked to the lady on the phone a minute, and I said, well, do you have anything in Sanderson? And she said, you want to go to Sanderson? I said, yes, ma'am, I would. And she said, well, if you want to go to Sanderson, I can get you Sanderson. She's like, that's one of like the last old patrol stations down there. And I said, yes, ma'am, I do. And she said, okay, we'll call you back. And sure enough, they did, and they offered me Sanderson, and I accepted. And then I told Jill about it later. First I called
right.
my old Border Patrol friend, Charlie Pirtle, who had spent a really good career in the Border Patrol and was known on both sides of the river for his tracking abilities. The guys who crossed back and forth knew who Charlie was.
Absolutely.
And, I called Charlie first and told him, and he was excited. And he said, well, what did Jill say? I said, well, I didn't tell her yet. So then I told Jill, and it was good. She was a pharmacist there in Alpine, during that time. And, after I started in Sanderson, we had our middle daughter, who is, going to be 22 now. And, Jill moved down there with me. I had a little RV I'd stay in, because that's about 85 miles between Alpine and there. And that's
yes,
sometimes I'd have to stay. Well, so she quit working when we had our middle daughter and moved down there, and she loved it. She was very involved with the community. She spent about 7, almost 8 years there before we decided to move back to Alpine, and I transferred. But it was a good place. It's small. You have to make a grocery list if you're going to live down there. You're not close to anything. You've been in that country, but it's a good place to be, and it was a great place to work. It's still a good place to work. Anybody interested in the Border Patrol, I would say, if you want to do old-fashioned Border Patrol work, that's the place to go.
Yes, sir. I can see that. I'll tell you what. I hunted mule deer all north and west and a little bit east of there for years ago, and I've always always loved that West Texas country, and that's always been very dear to me because I think some of the hunts more than anything else. Some of the people that I met out there too, you couldn't have met any better people than live in that area.
No, and there's some characters out there too. You know, it takes a tough sort of person to make a living out in that country, especially in the ranchers. And boy, you meet some characters, but just a lot of good people.
Oh my gosh, yes sir, you're right. And those are big old ranches too, and because of that, there are not a whole lot of people that live out there, but those that are, as you mentioned, are just absolutely really great people. But some of the characters I've met out there in that part of the world, and I wish when I met them years ago, I wish we'd had, or I wish I'd had the forethought of taking a audio tape to tape some of their stories, because I made some notes on them, and those things, but it wasn't like those guys telling those stories.
Right. Yeah. And, but 15 years ago, you didn't even think of stuff like that. And prior to that, and now, you could pull your phone out and make a recording if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It's been really neat to be able to do that.
It really would. You mentioned your first trip to Africa. What was that like? Why did you want to go to Africa to begin with? Or did you want to go to Africa?
Oh yeah, I did. But actually, what got us going on that trip is my oldest daughter, who she's going to have a baby soon, so I'm out here giving her a hand in California with the other two little grandkids because her husband's deployed. And when she was in high school, she's just out of the blue, and all my girls I've taken hunting as much as they wanted to go. I don't make them go, but if they want to go deer hunting with me or whatever, go to the range, take them with me. And she says, "Dad, I want to kill a kudu." So I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, when you graduate, I'll take you." I had no plan, no idea how I was going to do it. And as luck would have it, Jim Wilson one day mentions, he said, "Hey, Richard Mann's got a group of hunters he put together to go to South Africa, and there's room for another hunter if you'd like to go." I think, well, perfect timing. So Jill had just bought her pharmacy there in Alpine and couldn't go. That's my wife.
Right.
So I told Jill, I said, "Well, I'm heck with it." I pulled some money out of my retirement account and we went to Africa, and it was a great time. Hunted with Fort Richmond Safaris, really good people, family-owned ranch, and Grace wanted that kudu, and that's what we concentrated on, and got her a really nice free-range kudu, really good hunt.
Cool.
It was everything worked out perfect, and so if you like Africa, you're done after you step foot over there. So now, I'm constantly thinking of ways to, all right, how am I going to go back as soon as we can? And luckily, my wife likes it too, so she's understanding of my spending.
I've gotten tickled over the years in that I've had people come to me and says, "I'm thinking about going to Africa," and I can look in their eyes and I can tell they're going, "I'm going to go to Africa, get it out of my system." And my advice always the same thing is when they say, "What do you think?" And I said, "Don't go." And they'll go, "What? What do you mean don't go?" And I said, "Because you're thinking you're going to go this one time and you're going to be finished with Africa." And I said, "I promise you, by the time you get back on that plane, start coming home, you're going to go, if I work here a little bit extra, if I sell this, if I do this, I can go back again real quick, a whole lot quicker."
That's exactly how it works. Yeah, I know.
It's truly amazing. What are some of the animals you've taken over there since? And I know that you've been back since that first time.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I've been fortunate and been back 3 more times. Cape Buffalo that's what's got me hooked now. That's all I want to do is think about hunting those buffalo. And I've done it with a handgun, which makes it fun. It's a challenge, I guess a little added challenge doing it with the handgun, but it's definitely doable if you want to, do it.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What handgun did you use, and what bullet and all that other kind of thing? Because
sure.
I love hunting with handguns. You're one up on me. I've shot several buffalo in Africa and different countries and all that kind of stuff. But it's always been with a rifle. Most of the countries I've hunted, I've not had the opportunity to take a handgun, unfortunately. But what were you using? I'll spit it out here in a minute.
Sure. Well, the first two were I killed them with the Freedom Arms 454 Casull, and used buffalo boar's ammo, 360 grain hard cast, and that thing was about 1425 feet per second. Very accurate. Those big wide nosed hard cast bullets, and boy, they work. Those bullets will penetrate. Both, a couple of bulls, they're 20 yards, 22 yards, something like that, which is what you want.
Right.
It's close. Of course, after the first one, the PH I hunted with, Eon over there with Quagga Safaris, really good guy. We get along really well. He says, "Hey, we got to do this again sometime." I said, "You bet." He said, "But let's not get so close next time." but good times. And then this last bull I killed was with Tim Sundles on his Buffalo Boar Game Preserve there in South Africa. Ronnie Wells out of Houston has RW grip frames, and he's building some really nice top shelf custom single actions. And Ronnie built me a 500 line ball, and that's another Buffalo Boar load, 525 grains, about 1,100 feet per second, and that's a buffalo killer for sure. It's a good combination. Ended up having to shoot a lot further than I had planned, about 80 yards on that bull. That country's real open. Yeah, it's very open, and these bulls came out in front of us. We were kind of at the base of the hill, and they were up on the side across the draw from us. And it was shoot or not. I mean, they were going to go over the top, and they knew we were there. So anyway, I was felt good about it and made the shot and put a few rounds in him, and it all worked out. But now I'm hooked. I don't know what I keep thinking I love hunting whitetail. I love hunting anything, but
absolutely,
I'd like to get some really big whitetail. And I think, God dang it, I need to go, another bull. I want to go hunt another bull, and so I'm kind of hung up on that right now.
That's easily done. You mentioned the 454 Casull and the Freedom Arms. Years ago, the biggest thing I've shot thus far with the Freedom Arms was a Alaskan brown bear that I shot, with a Branham. It was probably, that was 30 years ago or something like that, looking back now. But that's one of my favorite rounds. I've got a bison hunt set up on the Choctaw Hunting Lodge in January. Going to be up there. Steve Hornady's going to be there hunting buffalo at the same time I am, but I'm going to be using that 454 Casull, and I know what it's capable of. That's got to be one of my all-time favorite rounds. So I'm thrilled to hear that
you can kill anything.
Years ago, when that thing really first started coming out, I had a friend of mine that lived in Dallas, and he was very wealthy, thankfully, and he went to Africa and shot buffalo with it, shot elephant with it, and I think he shot a hippo with it as well too. So, and he, I couldn't wait for him to get back. Of course, then we didn't have the phones that we do now, where you can send pictures. And I think the first day he got back, I was up there saying, "Okay, tell me about the hunt. Show me what you got." Kind of thing. So.
Yeah, those big bore revolvers and those heavy bullets, I mean, you can kill anything with them. On that 500, I had one or two. I remember one for sure that was bulging the hide on the offside, and that was from, I shot that bull, like I said, 80 yards, and then he moved. He wouldn't go up. I mean, I hit him good the first shot, and he wouldn't go up. He just kind of walked off out to the side and a little lower, but he got behind some brush. I had to wait to get a shot again.
Right.
And ended up shooting him last time about 100 yards. And one of those bullets had the hide bulged on the opposite side. So, I mean, that's pretty good for that distance out of a, 5 3/4 inch barrel out of a revolver.
Yes, it is. And I mean, that's a lot of energy. I've not shot anything with a 500 line ball. I did shoot a bison a few years ago, free range bison up in Oklahoma with a 500 S&W. And the amazing thing about it was they hit that bull absolutely perfect. You know, a lot of people hit them a little bit high because they think with the lungs and heart and all that, hit this thing right square through the heart and lungs. And it still took several shots to bring that particular bull down. I guess adrenaline kicked in or something like, you know, something similar to that.
Oh,
but,
it's amazing what those animals can take. And, you know,
Uh-huh.
especially, and I think, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it because you've hunted a lot more than I have. But it seems like those African animals, they get a bigger adrenaline dump than some of our animals here. It's like once they have it, they act like they're bulletproof. You can hammer them and they just keep wanting to go. Have you experienced that?
I have. I've killed Cape buffalo with one shot, and I've also killed them on the 13th shot. Now, the interesting thing about Cape buffalo, since you mentioned those, the Cape buffalo is the only mammal that has a bone in its heart. It's like two little wafers called the os capher. And what happens is when that adrenaline kicks in, even though that animal is physically dead, there's still enough adrenaline in there to where it keeps those acting like a baffle, so it keeps that heart pumping. And I think that's one of the reasons that Cape buffalo are so dead gum tough at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, and then to our side and theirs, we have the aoudad, lots of aoudad out in West Texas.
Oh, yes.
And those son of a guns, they can take a punch sometimes that you would think no way that sheep is still on his feet. But I don't know. It's just, and you know, sometimes you shoot, they hit the ground, and that's it. And then the next time, you got to keep on shooting.
You know, and I've experienced what you were talking about earlier, the same thing. I've killed a fair amount of stuff in Africa where I've shot it and killed it with one shot. But there are times that even though that shot was absolutely perfectly placed, and, you know, I confirmed it later, you know, we were taking the animal apart, it just did not go down. And I think maybe it has to do with those critters are continually evolving with large predators like leopards and lions and those kind of things. And I think because of that, they probably don't give up quite as easily as, you know, some of maybe our North American animals do that don't maybe evolve with that, but in more recent years have not had to deal with the predators like the African animals continually have to do.
No, I agree. I don't know if there's a scientific explanation, but it sure, from what I've seen, it sure seems like that's how it works. You know, they're just very tough, and they get that adrenaline dump, and you better get ready to do some shooting.
You know, and I hate to be this way, but I am. I love to shoot, and I love for an animal to essentially be dead at the first shot. But I like to put more than one shot into an animal because I want to see. I want to see what that bullet does. You know, and if I can recover it, that's fine. You know, if not, that's fine too. But I want to see what kind of performance I got out of that bullet from different angles and all those kind of things. And
right.
Going back to the years when I was a research biologist doing wildlife disease research, we shot so many animals, particularly here in Texas, every animal that we did, we'd put down, we did complete necropsies on, or autopsies, if you will. And so to me, that's always been a fun part. And if there's an opportunity to shoot an animal a second time or even a third time, you know, I don't want that animal to suffer to begin with in any form or fashion, but I'd sure like to put a bullet into an animal when I get the opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. I know what you're talking about.
You mentioned Jim Wilson, Sheriff Jim Wilson. Now, you and Jim have been friends for several years, I know, and I had the great pleasure of serving on staff with Jim and also somebody else you mentioned a while ago, Mr. Bill Jordan, and when I was on Shooting Time staff years ago. Jim's an interesting guy in so many different ways. Now, y'all have got a new project that you started, about a year or so ago that the two of you are very much involved in?
December will be a year that we had it up. We started last December, and that was kind of one of the things when I decided to retire. And I talked about that with Jim. You know, I was thinking I was ready to retire and tackle the gun riding thing full time. And he said, I think you should do it. You know, he's very supportive. And then once I made up my mind, he said, "Hey, what do you think about teaming up and let's do an online? We'd love to have a print magazine. I love my
Right.
print magazines and my books,
Yes,
but
sir. I do too.
there's a trend. There's a trend going away from it to everything online, but then there's also, look at Field and Stream. They came back from
Right.
doing that. So there's always hope that we'll keep our print media. But anyway, Jim says, what do you think about teaming up and let's do an online magazine, telling stories, writing about guns, old lawmen history, hunting stories, stuff like that. I said, heck yeah, let's do it. So we came up with Gun Tales, so guntales.net, and every week we each put an article on there, and then it's grown since we started, and we're able to pay some writers and have the pleasure of Mr. Wiseman being. You're going to be our first or second guy to be on there. That's
Oh my
depending
gracious.
on when our webman puts it up. I hadn't talked to him yet, so we have a friend of mine who I used to work with. He's our web guy because Jim and I we send emails and texts, and that's about as technical as we get.
I'm laughing
And
because that's me. I've got somebody that does my podcast and all those other things. Everything. I know how to do those two reasonably well, and I got to find somebody that really knows what they're doing. And having seen Gun Tales and read some of the stories, I am absolutely enthralled, impressed, and truly honored to have something there. I mean, my gracious, I can't think, and of course I'll be very open with you and anybody else that listens. You and Jim have been my heroes. Jim for a long time, you for not quite that long, but once I started seeing your writing and saw how you wrote and found out who you were and where you came from, oh my God, you became one of my heroes as well too.
Well, I appreciate that. Same here. I mean, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, you're going to be doing a podcast with Larry Weishuhn about writing, and I'd have said, yeah, there's no way that's going to ever happen. So I really appreciate that very much. And we're glad to have you on there, and I hope this is going to be the first of many, because it's a good place. Magazines, they have to, whether it's a review they want or, there's guidelines they follow and certain things they want in, and you can't always just write about whatever you want. I mean, some very fortunate writers can probably do that. But so on our site, we write about what we want, and, if there's a certain gun I like or Jim likes, or, Jim's great at telling those old lawman tales.
Oh my gosh, is he ever?
He's got, who knows, hundreds, thousands of stories in his head and he's a historian. Yeah, I mean,
yes,
he's done that his whole life. Really neat stories and about the old lawman, and a lot of those guys who I would consider the old guys. Well, Jim knew them when he was a young man and a young police officer. He knew a lot of those guys, the old Rangers that were old men at that time. So he's got some really neat experiences that he can pull from of actually sitting around with those guys and talking with them and listening to them tell stories. And then the historical aspect of it, he's always reading. I've never known anybody that reads as much as that man. He's got a stack of books by his chair at all times, and you give him a book to read, and a few days later he gives it back because he's read it already. I mean, he's just avid reader. And so it's a lot of neat stuff. We're excited to do it. It's just something that, every time you sit down to write a story, you're excited about it because it's something you want to tell, And it seems to be our readers are commenting, and people like it. They like that old style of storytelling.
To me, of course, I grew up reading those kind of things, and you mentioned some of the old time law enforcement. My father-in-law's name was Ed Potter, who was in law enforcement, my God, for 50, almost 60 years, and during the time when I was going to school, back before you need to be certified and all this kind of stuff, I did a little bit of stuff with him every time when he needed any help. But going back to that, I remember sitting around, going back in the middle 1960s, around campfires with some of his old time friends who were old time Texas Rangers and old time sheriffs and deputies and all that kind of stuff, back in the 60s. And these guys had been around. They were in their 70s and even some in their 80s, and listening to their stories, it was just absolutely, totally enthralling. But I've noticed too from, with Jim's stories, particularly when he was, some things he wrote about when he was with shooting times, when he and Mr. Bill Jordan get together as well too. I'd sit back and listen to them tell stories about some of the people that I'd met, but my God, they were just fascinating stories. And I've come to realize that nobody's doing those kind of things these days anymore. And it's become, the stories are being lost. So, my God, with Jim doing those, with your background and where you came from and the areas that you came from and the people that you've met and known over these years, to get those stories, I want to say on paper, it is, but I guess it's on digital paper now.
Yeah.
That's just phenomenal, you get him excited just listening to you talk about these kind of things.
Well, I think, I don't know if it was an original Jeff Cooper quote, but I know he wrote it. It said, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And I always think about that. And you think about, you're talking about those guys you've met throughout your life and hunting career and career as a biologist. And if you don't write those stories down, they're gone. Once you're gone, those stories are gone. And my granddad was a big time storyteller, my grandpa Ashley. And, I didn't, I never thought about that. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. And as a kid, I didn't write anything down. And I remember a lot of them, or I remember parts of them. But had I known then what I know now, I would have taken notes. And of course, like you said, if you'd had a way of recording that, those tales. So that's what we want to work toward, is just getting it down on paper. Same with you. You think about something one of those old lawmen were talking about, or an old hunter trapper around the campfire sometime, a story, heck, write it down and it'll be something we can use later on, because that's what we want to do, is just tell those stories and have them out there. The beauty of the digital thing is unless the computers crash or, it gets taken away, it's always up there. Of course, you're probably like me. I've got tons of old magazines, and I keep all that stuff. And when I'm constantly, actually, you mentioned that Art of Brush Hunting by John Wooters the other day,
right?
In your article that will be coming out. I got online and I found it on eBay. So
did you really?
I did. So if you don't have that, I'll get a copy for you and send it to you. But
I'll have to
you
go
can
back
find
and
anything.
look. I'll be darned. I never even thought about doing that. Yeah. That particular article stuck to me because, John had written, of course, I didn't know who John Wooters was at that time, but, Dean and I got to be really good friends over the years with some of the things we did and all that. And, going back, I'll have to go back. I don't think I have it. I'll have to try to get a copy of that. Get a photocopy of it or something. Oh, you man, I would truly, truly appreciate that. Good gosh.
So, so having that online, that story's always going to be out there, unless you're like you and I and you're got stacks of magazines everywhere. Or you're buying. My wife's very impressed of how many old magazines come into our house. She said, "What? Where are you going to put this?" It's literature, babe. It's literature.
It is. It's very important literature as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's good stuff. There's nothing better on a cold, rainy day than digging out a box that's been stowed for 10, 15 years and going through old hunting magazines. Pour a cup of coffee and just start going through the old magazine. The 70s, 80s, early 90s, that to me, that is like the time of the Guns and Ammo, Shooting Times, the Peterson's Hunting. I mean, those magazines were, I don't know, they're just really neat to me, those time periods. And you still had Elmer Keith, Jack O'Connor, John Wooters, and then the
Yes.
young crowd of Larry Weishuhn, Jim Wilson come into play, into those magazines as well. And it's just, to me, that's what a magazine should look like. And, I've got tons of them.
I do too. You know, what was interesting is when I first started writing, we were, as you mentioned, we were still in the storytelling stage. And I think what happened along the way is, I'm going to blame it on the editors, because a lot of those editors that I dealt with during those early years were old-time hunters, old-time gun people. They understood everything. As they went by the wayside, all of a sudden we got literally what I would call kids out of journalism school who had no background in any of the things that we're just talking about. And we went from telling stories and providing great information in those stories, a lot of times with people not even realizing they were getting it, to almost writing recipes for a long time. And it was primarily, I think, a lot of those young editors, quote unquote, that really didn't know what was going on, and they were wanting to know, and they just assumed everybody else was kind of the same way. And maybe to a point, you know, people were, but that really kind of changed things. And thankfully, guys like you and Jim are now going back the opposite way, if you will. So I love what you guys are doing.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that's obviously there's a market for it. You know, folks want to read that type of thing. And I hope, you know, I'd like nothing more that down the road that we could turn it into a print magazine. But if we can't, I mean, you know, online's the next best thing. And then adding other writers like you over time to at least every once in a while contribute something. And it, you know, in that way, it's just not just Jim and I writing. I mean, when you're in there, or whoever the next writer will be coming in, we got Daryl Bokey going to do and Daryl's he's more. Do you know Daryl or heard of him? He's in
I've heard of him.
Longtime cop. You know, very knowledgeable on gunfighting and that type of thing. But he's also got a historian streak in him, so he's got some really cool stuff he likes to tell about, man. And he's going to do an article on the Fitz specials that were a big thing back in the day, where the trigger guards cut off with the revolvers, and kind of a historical piece on that. And you probably saw some of those old timers that would have that done to their guns. And,
I did. Those, gosh, you bring back so many memories of going back into, we're talking about 60 years ago, you know, and that I'm thinking about. And those guys, you know, they were, like I said, in their 60s and 70s and all that. And the stories they told, just, oh my gosh. God, I'm so excited for what you guys are doing. I know you've got grandkids you're going to have to go see about it here in just a little bit. And I've unfortunately got to get off to a meeting here in just a little bit as well too. Let's tell people again how they can learn more about Gun Tales.
Or just log on to guntales.net. Or you can search Gun Tales or just type in guntales.net. It'll come up, and it's online. It's a subscription. It's $10 a month or $90 for the year. It's pretty easy to log on to, and we'd be glad to have you.
I'll tell you what, based on what I've seen and what I've read, and I've tried to keep up with it as much as I possibly can, I love what you guys are doing. I think obviously a whole lot of other folks will love the same thing. So, Shane, thank you so much. I'm going to be out in your part of the world, not in California, but out in West Texas, thankfully, probably come December. If it's okay, I'll holler at you ahead of time, and we'll get you and Sheriff Jim and kick around the fire a little bit if we can.
That sounds good. I look forward to it, and I appreciate you having me.
Oh, Shane, thank you so very much. All the best to you out there, and to your daughters and their families and all that. Please tell your son-in-law how much we appreciate him doing what he does as well, too. And Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see everybody right back here, or at least around the campfire and listening perspective next week. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you then.
DSC's Campfires with Larry Weishuhn has also been brought to you by The Crown Bar in LaGrange, Texas, the Texas Wildlife Association, Double Nickel Taxidermy, and Burnham Brothers Game Calls.